Dr. Moniz, good morning.
Hello, good morning.
The floor is yours first to talk about innovation. And what I'd like to do is encourage you as well to put points to the Energy Secretary while he's speaking. Andre and Bertrand, if you'd just like to sit there, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, Nick, and certainly thanks to UNEP for organizing this opportunity to talk about the intersection of government and industry and the private sector, and in particular to pursue the innovation theme. I do want to say how pleased I am to see again my friends Bertrand and Andre, who I had the opportunity to see after I was approximately 20 days or something as Energy Secretary, and they flew into Washington, D.C. As I'll say, it really is inspirational. What they do is really, I think, just change our perception of what's possible and encourage continued innovation in the clean energy space. Indeed, let me say that we have in this year leading up to Paris, I'm talking now in particular about the Department of Energy, where our responsibilities include the majority of support for clean energy technology innovation. Our theme has been innovation as an enabler for pursuing our climate agenda successfully over many, many timescales. From the short time scale, where we need to continue the impressive deployments of clean energy technologies, to the intermediate, to the very long time scale, when the kinds of ambition that we are talking about in the context of current commitments will not look nearly ambitious enough as we get to mid-century and beyond, and when we are talking not about 25 or 30% reductions in greenhouse gas emissions, but about 80 to 100% emissions reductions in emissions. Let me also introduce, before I make a few other comments, my colleague Lynn Orr from the Department of Energy. He's our Undersecretary for Energy and Science, and I want to particularly note so that he has responsibility for these innovation programs, but he also flies. So I think he's particularly thrilled to be here with our Solar Impulse team. So let me say a few more words about first the innovation theme generally, and then about some specifics. So our view is that there is a very important kind of virtuous cycle of innovation, of increased deployment, and of cost reduction of these technologies. That paradigm is well established. If I look at just the time period from the Copenhagen conference to this conference of the parties, we have seen cost reductions of wind, solar, batteries, LEDs that range from 40 to 90%. And it's no accident that certainly in the United States, therefore, we have seen deployments increase by 3-fold for wind, 20-fold for solar, 200-fold for LEDs. So this is kind of the paradigm that I believe we have to sustain. We have to keep working at it. It will be, in my view, a very critical foundation for the kind of increasing ambition that we need to see year by year and decade by decade. So again, I think our friends here just drive us to think about that as a critical path forward. And of course, solar technologies themselves are a fabulous example of this, again, this cycle of cost reduction, innovation, and deployment increases. In the solar area, we again have seen all kinds of innovation. I'll highlight one in which, if those of you who go to the industry display area out at Le Bourget can see at least a little piece of a novel hybrid technology that optimizes the use of the solar spectrum between photovoltaics and solar thermal. So this is the kind of continuing innovation I think that we'll see. Perhaps they could use this in the future to both fly and stay warm when they're at 28,000 feet there. But it's really a wonderful innovation. I'll also mention LED lighting as an example of, again, a very similar technology to photovoltaics. And again, just now in the 2 years since we first met at Dulles Airport, we have seen something like a 50% cost reduction, and in the United States, a 6-fold increase in deployment in only 2 years. Now suddenly being up to approximately 80 million deployed. And I want to emphasize, this is not just about the advanced economies. If we look at what India is doing to take advantage of this kind of progress, it is amazing. Literally doing purchases of hundreds of millions of LEDs, which will address, of course, emissions issues because of their efficiency, but at the same time address the social justice issues that we need to address simultaneously. In that case, many of you know India, with 300 million people with no electricity at all, the ability to bring in these highly efficient light bulbs with therefore very modest electricity supply requirements really will transform lives at the same time that we build a clean energy economy. The last comment I'll make in terms of the impacts of this cycle of innovation and deployment and cost reduction is also, if we look at the implications for our economy, I think a lot of people still think about this as some small niche activity going on. Well, in the United States, we now have approximately 175,000 direct jobs in the solar industry. That is much bigger than manufacturing automobiles and many other activities. So these are important activities in every dimension. And I'll just end by again saying we are committed to innovation. We think it is central to our future, and we thank our Solar Impulse colleagues for being pioneers, adventurers who really bring that theme home every time we see them. So thank you very much. I look forward to our discussion.
Mr. Secretary, I know your time is tight this morning because you've got to get to Le Bourget. Before we talk to Bertrand and André, can I just ask you a couple of questions which have already come in? This, for example, from Sam Adams, CEO of Vert Asset Management. Where does the DOE stand on the upcoming expiration of the solar tax credit in the US? What do you expect will happen?
Well, first of all, where the administration stands, where the president stands, is to strongly support an extension of the tax credits. That is certainly a very active discussion right now in Congress. I cannot say how it will turn out, but I can certainly say that over the next what is today? Today is Tuesday.
Yes.
Over the next 10 days, we are very optimistic that there will be a tax extender package, and I personally find it hard to understand how there can be such a package without including an extension of the renewable, both production and investment tax credits.
And just to pick up what Achim Steiner said yesterday, I think you were here, you just came in when I was reminding people what he'd said at the head of UNEP, that we're now on a low carbon pathway. Whether you're speaking as the secretary at the moment or in your previous positions as a leading scientist, do you believe now that is now irreversible, or there are still potentials for this low carbon pathway to be a stalling mechanism at some point?
Well, I think we are definitely on the path to a low carbon future. I think I hope that we are now at kind of the peaking level, and that we will see a continuous bending of the curve down. But I think there's no question about where we are going. I think the issue is the pace at which we get there. And we certainly don't have a lot of time. And that's where, again, I think this continuing innovation agenda is so important because we need to pick up the pace to get there.
Can I get a microphone to Shana Udvadi? Where are you, Shana, please? Microphone in the middle. Put your hand up, please, and I'll come to you in a moment. One other question here. Get the microphone to Shana, please. Do you think one day we can cover 100% of our requirements with solar and wind and other renewables? That from Mahat Chebo of SAP.
Well, clearly, to get there, we're going to have to address other issues of energy storage, that is, it's the same theme fundamentally, by the way. It's not that we can't do it, it's the cost reduction that enables an acceleration of that. And we will also have to address the infrastructure issues. And there, for example, we at the Department of Energy, in addition to this kind of technology innovation of supply and demand, we also have a major focus on modernization of the grid in the sense of complete integration with information technology, new architectures for that technology, and I think we're just scratching the surface of the integration of information technology and what it can do. So that's also a major focus and a major enabler to reach this tremendous penetration of renewables.
Because we heard from the World Energy Council yesterday, it's a myth that renewables can ever meet energy demand. Demand for energy will double, and so will demand. Renewables will double, but so will demand.
Well, first of all, I think we are seeing maybe delinking is too strong a word, but we are seeing certainly the weakening of the historical connections between demand and emissions. I think that's already an established fact in many places. That certainly is the direction we have to keep driving in. Now, I mean. Let me say, I would say it doesn't violate any law of physics to have renewables ultimately, completely dominate the production. I personally think that's not where we will go. I think we will have what we often call an all of the above approach. That is, we will have a tremendous demand side contribution to meeting our goals. To be frank, I have never seen a credible pathway to the low carbon future that we are talking about without a major demand side contribution, energy efficiency and the like. But secondly, I do believe that we will have different low carbon solutions in different parts of the world, and frankly, in my own country, in different parts of the United States. And some of that will include novel nuclear technologies. Some of it will include carbon capture and sequestration, and it will include a whole spectrum of renewables. We do always talk about wind and solar. We also have what are sometimes called the forgotten renewables, geothermal, small head hydro. We have many, many other possibilities. And we believe in investing across the board and then let the marketplace, conditioned by different geographies, choose the right mix for a low-carbon future.
We heard from the president of Iceland. He certainly left a clear impression that geothermal does have a significant future.
It's not forgotten in Iceland.
And for export as well. Now, I've chosen this question from Shana Udvadi, managing partner with Omnicarbon, a small startup in the early stages, because it illustrates the transition to Bertrand and André and what you've been doing with innovation and starting up as well. Shana, you're in the dark, but...
Yes, thank you so much. So the question is that we are a small startup in the early stages, and we're talking to a lot of small businesses and other businesses on pathways to decarbonize. And while we see a lot of good things happening and good progress, we find that there's a reluctance for businesses to decarbonize because they believe that it's going to hit their profits. So what do you think we can do, or what is necessary to convince businesses that they can decarbonize and increase their profits? Thank you.
I'm remarkably stuck on one theme. Cost reduction, innovation and cost reduction, I think, will be the key driver. And again, those fit together with increasing deployment. To get there, and mentioning the private sector, should say, well, I'll say two things. One is, if we look at a particular program at the Department of Energy called ARPA-E, for example, it's a program that was created in 2009 that is particularly there to work in a little bit more freewheeling style than is traditional for a government program. What we've seen is tremendous, at least intermediate metrics of success. The first 140 projects that were completed through 2014 led to 30 new companies being formed. So we are seeing, again, this, I think, capacity to innovate that is really quite tremendous. But now what we are seeing as well, and we saw it a week ago Monday, the very first day of COP, when 20 country leaders announced Mission Innovation as a coalition of countries committed to doubling the R&D pipeline. But in parallel, we saw a coalition called the Breakthrough Energy Coalition, led by Bill Gates, that in parallel is committed to putting a lot of capital on the table. But what I want to emphasize is capital with which they are willing to be very patient, not the usual kind of time for return on an investment, but they recognize it may take 10, 20 years in some of these energy technologies, and also very risk tolerant, willing to take big chances on transformational technology. So I think we're seeing a lot of this movement, but again, the outcome, the product of this innovation will be continued reduction in costs, serving both the developed and the developing economies.
Mr. Secretary, thank you very much. I hope you can stay for a little bit while we listen to Bertrand and André. Initiator, Chairman and Pilot, Bertrand, welcome. Nice to see you again. And also André Borschberg, who's CEO, co-founder and pilot of Solar Impulse. If you think you've taken risks, both in terms of building a business and also in going right to the cutting edge of where innovation is, you ain't seen anything yet until you've seen and understood what Solar Impulse has achieved. Let's hear from you for about 15 minutes, André and Bertrand, first of all.
Yes, good morning, everyone. And it's a pleasure to be with you, Dr. Moniz, again, because when we arrived with Solar Impulse in the US, we really felt at home, the country of pioneers of aviation and so much innovation. And you were so friendly to come and see our plane. But we are here to speak about innovation. Nick told me, let's focus on it. So I would like to show you the newest and most modern piece of innovation ever in 1920. In 1920, this was extremely useful. We don't use it anymore. We don't use it anymore. So my big question today is, why do we still use a lot of technologies from the same time, also from 1920? I mean, combustion engines, incandescent light bulbs, badly insulated houses, grids and distribution of energy. All these old systems from 1920 are still used today. And they have so many losses, they are so badly efficient that they cause, if we count everything, they cause 50% of the CO2 emissions in the world. 50% of the CO2 emissions of the world are not caused by what we need, they are caused by losses. And for me, this is an incredible question. Why do we still use them? We could replace all this with electrical or hybrid vehicles. We could insulate our houses completely. We could have heat pumps instead of electrical heaters. We could have LED lamps. We could have smart grids. We know how to distribute energy with 5% losses instead of 50% losses. This would create jobs and make money. Can you imagine the turnover for the industry if we were to replace these old polluting technologies with new clean technologies? But usually we speak of production. And the question that was before to Dr. Monitz is a real question that comes all the time. Can we replace the type of production of energy of today with renewable energies? No, we will not be able to do it if we are not more energy efficient. Today, we are like a human being in the bathtub. There is a leak in the bathtub. And what is the guy doing in his bath? He's opening the tap, full power to bring more water in the bathtub to compensate the leak. The only logical behavior, and I mean not ecological behavior, the most logical behavior is to solve the leak. And this is where renewable energies will start to be enough. If we speak of innovation, this is where we have to go today. Now, the other risk of speaking of innovation is to imagine that we don't have enough today to solve the problem and that we need more innovation. And this is what some governments are saying. You never say that, and it's fantastic. But so many reluctant people in our field are saying, oh yes, we need to solve climate change, we need to reduce CO2 emissions, and this is why we have to invest in innovation, because probably in 20 years we'll have solutions. And they believe that everybody is going to be happy with that. We cannot be happy with that. We have the solutions today. So innovation, of course, has to continue, of course, but we don't need to wait before we start. We have enough already today to divide by 2 the CO2 emissions, create jobs, make profit, and stimulate growth. And this is maybe a message we don't give enough to the developing countries, because we're still hearing that rich countries have to pay, and poor countries have to reduce their economical development. Well, go in a developing country and see the constructions, see the buildings they need to make for their people. With André, we were in Chongqing. Half of the city is under construction. It's normal. You cannot stop it. You cannot ask them to stop it and reduce it. And this is also a big misunderstanding when we speak of climate change. But we can make insulated houses and everything I was saying before. So even if there was no climate change, and this is something I really would like to bring to your awareness, even if there was no climate change, no issues with CO2, it would be completely logical to replace the old systems that are inefficient and have too many losses with new, modern, clean technologies that are efficient. Just because it's good for the industry, it's good for the development, it's good for the money. Which means that in this COP21, it would be fantastic if people could understand these opportunities and fight to have this replacement, fight to get the investments, fight to have this turnover of their industry. I don't understand why so many people are just laid back and braking with 4 brakes when they see the implications and they see the profit and they see the development they can do. So if you are here today, it's because you know it. It's because you're convinced. So maybe a debate like this one is almost useless because we all are convinced of it. But maybe to be efficient on a human way, not only energy way, we should try to speak to as many negotiators as possible. Because what I feel in this COP21 is a tremendous amount of enthusiasm, solutions, and opportunities that come from all the side events, from all the speeches, from all the gatherings, from all the interviews, and from all the political declarations. But there are people who are negotiating for commas, periods, datas, figures, words, sentences. And this is hard. No, but you know, they make a good job. They work day and night for that, day and night. But I'm not sure they feel the tremendous energy and enthusiasm that we have. And this is why we should talk to them and Bring them this enthusiasm, bring them this energy, because maybe it will help them. Help them to feel what happens outside of the closed area of negotiations. If we can do that, we can be really useful. And this is what we can do in the next 3 or 4 days before the end of COP21. Good luck to everyone.
Good morning to all of you, and it's a pleasure to see you again, Secretary Monitz. It reminds me the good times I had and what I learned at MIT, where you used to teach there, so it's a great pleasure to see you. I guess you all know that what we try to do is to fly around the world with a solar-powered airplane. You know, when we started, we wanted to do a couple of things, but what we wanted to have is an airplane which was what I would call pure, not embarking any fuel from the ground, collecting its energy in flight. So a pure renewable energy solution. And when we started to think about how to solve it or how to get this done, it was clear that, in fact, it was not so much about building a new airplane, but it was really about understanding how to use the energy which is given by the sun. So it became a project of energy efficiency. And interestingly also is when we started, I mean, our first reaction was to propose this to the aviation world and ask them if they could build this airplane. You have to realize, in fact, that the feasibility study we did told us that the airplane had to be very big, bigger than a 747, and very light, the weight of a car. And when we talked to the aviation world, they simply told us that they believe it was impossible. And I'm sure you have been in many situations where you get this kind of answer. But what I think it told us was that we had to do in a different way than what they used to do. And that's what we started to develop. So we brought a lot of partners, a lot of companies, a lot of technologies outside from the aviation world, thought about how to make this airplane energy efficient, lighter. Simple solution. Now, for example, we insulated batteries, pilots against the cold, because we fly extremely high altitude, 28,000 feet, where it's minus 40 degrees. And this insulation goes today into refrigerators. Refrigerators have a standard dimension. Of course, the thinner the insulation, the more space you have inside. The better the insulation, the lowest amount of energy you need. And through this solution, we were able to get our 2 airplanes flying. 12 years of work, 2 airplanes. So you can imagine the sequence of development, and I'm sure you can imagine also how many obstacles you face. I think one thing you have to be certainly is perseverant. But one thing I learned also was that when you have these obstacles, when you have these difficulties, it always is behind an opportunity to do better, certainly an opportunity to do it differently. But you need the right mindset. And slowly, in fact, I learned as well that when I'm really in front of something unexpected, difficult, I have to split my time in 2. Of course, on one side, solve the problem, but on the other side, free my mind enough to understand which opportunity I could get from this situation. What could make the future better? And that's what we experience over time. And interestingly, in fact, is that flying and developing this type of airplanes are in some ways quite similar in what you have to do. You know, we started the flight around the world from Abu Dhabi. We flew overland. This was short flight. For us, short flight are flights up to 24 hours duration. And then we came to the coast of Asia. And in Asia, we had to cross the Pacific. And with this type of airplane, the duration was at least 5 days, 5 nights to be able to the next island, which is Hawaii. And of course, the question was how to do it. And there was 3 challenges. I mean, Do we have the performance of the airplane? We didn't know yet. Can we predict the weather? Very unreliable after 5 days. 30% maximum, which means you have 70% chance that the weather is going to be different, so it will be different. And can we, as a pilot, sustain, in fact, this flight duration, as we have a sustainable aircraft in terms of energy, if it works? So what I started to do, and I think what we learn also when we fly, is that you visualize, because you know that, in fact, everything will happen in a different way. It's not going to be smooth. Not everything will be working properly. Weather will develop in a completely different way that's what you have planned. And you visualize all these different situations. You visualize to try to see how you could react, what you would do when it starts to be really difficult and when you have little time to think. I give you one example. When I left the coast of Japan for these 5 days, 5 nights flights, after 12 hours, there is what we call a point of no return. That's the last moment where you can turn back. After that, you are committed, you are over the ocean. The only solution, if you don't want to swim too long, is to get to the island. And when I reached this point of no return, there was one important equipment not working. And the engineers told me, the airplane is not in proper condition. You just cannot continue. You have to go back to Japan. There is no way that you can go over the ocean. This equipment was supervising the airplane when I was sleeping, and we sleep 20 minutes at a time. It's not long, but it brings a lot. But I looked at the question differently, and Bertrand was in the control center, and we had long discussions. The weather window for the first time was really good. And looking at the overall situation, I thought that the risk level was acceptable. But I could do this because I visualized a lot of this situation. I knew that something would go wrong, in fact, when I was in the air. And I think without this preparation, it would not have been possible to have really the right mindset to be able to continue. And that's what I do in my project as well, is try to understand all the possibilities, to prepare for them, to be ready, to anticipate. And I don't think we can foresee everything, but at least it takes the anxiety of not succeeding, of having a problem, away on the side. You know, we learned to use the parachute, to ditch in the water, to survive. So if we have to do this, we'll do it. And I even told myself that if you have to jump out of the ocean and land in the Pacific, enjoy it, because you don't have the possibility to do it every day. And when you have this mindset, it helps a lot. I mean, it helps a lot to go into the unknown. And when we want to innovate, that's what we need to do. So I wish you great pleasure in your exploration project, in your innovation project, and wish you all the best. Thank you very much.
Andre and Bertrand, thank you very much indeed. We still are lucky enough to have the Energy Secretary here. Can I just put a couple of things to you which have been stimulated by the conversation so far? This from Rodrigo Marquez. Why is R&D expenditure in energy innovation so low, minimal in proportion to US GDP, and what measures will be taken on this?
Oh, thank you. Actually, I will come to that question, but may I make first two comments. One is inspired by what Bertrand said in terms of, and I want to reinforce, the idea is we can't wait, and we have technologies to deploy now, even as we keep innovating more. But there was about 10 years ago, another pioneer, in my view, a gentleman named Harish Hande in India, was bringing energy services and light through photovoltaics and LEDs to rural India. He made an interesting statement 10 years ago. Solar is too expensive for the rich, but very affordable for the poor. And the reason was, of course, because a very small amount could change a life. The good news is 10 years later, it's even affordable for the rich. Because we've had this factor of 10 cost reduction. You know, it's really, really interesting. The second thing I just want to say also is that the pictures have moved on, but certainly when we saw that beautiful picture of this beautiful plane flying, I just want to tell you that kind of also this kind of innovation I'm talking about in terms of R&D, if you take about a 1/3 scale solar impulse, you could have seen a couple days ago at least, one of the projects that we invested in and now Google X is running, it's now flying wind turbines. And this could be a game-changing technology actually in terms of capturing the wind at 1,000 feet and avoiding some of the issues of land-based. So again, these are potentially, again, transformational technologies. Now, going to the question, the R&D, energy R&D investment in governments, you're absolutely correct, is way too low. And it's been stated for some years, not just by us, but by CEOs of major companies, not even energy companies, that we are underinvesting by perhaps factors of 3, typically. And that's one reason why this Mission Innovation initiative has a commitment to at least double energy R&D in the 20 countries over the next 5 years. And to give you a scale, the current R&D in those countries, energy R&D, is approximately $10 billion. So adding another $10 billion annual expenditure is the goal after the 5 years. And again, governments are being incented to do that by the private sector and saying, and we're willing to come in with this patient, risk-tolerant investments if you open up the innovation pipeline. So that's kind of the deal that was announced last Monday.
And the issue of storage as well. As Energy Secretary, and given your previous role in your labs and so on, where do you think power storage is, and where is that on the horizon?
Well, once again, I think tremendous progress. If we look at again, I'm going to use cost reduction as a metric. In the last 6 years, we have seen an approximate 70% reduction in storage costs. Now, again, that already allows many very, very sensible applications, and we are seeing those. But another factor of 2 or 3 would really, let's say in the electric vehicle market, allow much more broad penetration for either hybrid or purely electric vehicles. So again, it's the same story of this tremendous progress going on, and I think these gentlemen probably have a little bit to say about that as well.
And I need to just check, Mr. Secretary, how are you doing on time? Because I've got another couple of questions, and I can fire those at you now, or have you got another couple of minutes, and then otherwise Andre can speak.
I'm having fun, so I'll stay.
Thank you.
Now you know what's happening for the rest of the morning. Okay, thanks. Le Bourget can wait. I love that. Okay, so in that case, would you mind if Andre comes in and Bertrand, please?
Yeah, I just had a short comment on this question of storage, because I think we have 2 challenges. I mean, one, of course, is to increase the capacity. We see that's already for cars, at least some of the cars, we're getting to some points where it's acceptable. But I think the real challenge will be to be able to find technologies which use materials which are widely available. Lithium is great, but you have find lithium in 2-3 places around the world. So it's definitely, certainly not a technology which can last forever. But we have to find technical solutions which use materials which we can find everywhere, because these storage questions has to be solved everywhere, should be available everywhere. And I think this is the real challenge now.
In fact, if I may add, that's where, again, on the innovation front, we've established a major center where the whole issue is looking for earth-abundant materials and the new chemistries that will address your issue.
Bertrand, if you had...
But I think the material that we need, we all have it, but we don't use it. It's our brain. It's our smartness.
And there's a question here about behavioral change here.
There are so many possibilities to store energy that are just clever. When we arrived with André in Dallas-Fort Worth, we learned that during the night, when nobody is using the electricity, they store it. You know how? They store it in cooling down glycol to minus 20 Celsius. And during the day, when they need the air conditioning, they take normal air with a little fan, it goes through the glycol, and you have the air con with no use of energy. When we need to store energy in our houses, there is a new system that comes that nobody was thinking about 6 months ago. When you have an electrical car or a hybrid car and you reach 80% of capacity on your batteries, it's not good for your car anymore because you don't have the range you want. And people wanted to recycle these batteries, which cost 4,000 euros per ton. It's ridiculous to recycle batteries that still have 80% of capacity. Now these batteries are being planned to be used in houses. You put them in the cellar and you store your energy from wind or solar. You have so many smart possibilities. And it will not be just one way to store. It will be thousands of different ways. But all the energy will be stored, this is for sure.
And we are also, of course, seeing that same use of those, quotes, used batteries also in grid systems now,
Yes.
much more widely.
Yeah.
Mr. Secretary, again, a question which came up time and time again yesterday is, who is driving change? Is it the scientists, people like yourself, or is it the pressure now from the public? The public expectation is making much more something much more economically viable if it's developed in the lab. In other words, is it push or pull?
Yes. No, it really has to be. We are using the word innovation here, and we've been, I think all three of us are kind of inclined to attach that to technology. But actually, we need innovation in multiple dimensions going on. We need business model innovation. I mean, the utility industry, they need a different business model to reflect the new realities.
Because I'm picking up here, if I may just, it's about consumer behavior change, according to Matteo Vegas, MD of Sustain. In other words, if consumers want to change, then that drives the imperative.
Yes. So we need consumer innovation, technology innovation, business model innovation, policy innovation. We have a lot of, if I just take, this is now a little more inside baseball in a certain sense, but if I look at a lot of the policies that we have in the United States, they are policies derived of 1970s oil shocks. It does not reflect the current world that we live in. And so, again, we need innovation in how we think about the problem and what we have available to solve our problems.
We've got time for one more just point, if I can, to both Bertrand and André. When you look at the design of that, and that was several years ago, given the state of science now, how much of the design of Solar Impulse would be significantly different now because of innovation which has happened since you developed the plane?
Maybe not so much the design itself, because I think the aerodynamic laws didn't change much over the last 3 years. But what's inside, certainly, we have better solar cells, we have better batteries, we can improve on materials, so I think we can make progress. It's incremental. And when we started the project, that's 12 years ago, as I mentioned, I think we doubled the capacity of batteries since then. And when we did the studies at the time, we tried to project ourselves in the future, estimating how good the improvement was. And that's worked. I think we were a little bit conservative, but it worked. So we'll see the next generation of this airplane will be unmanned, will be designed to fly above 20 kilometers in the stratosphere for long duration, 6 months at least, able to do observation. So we'll be able to observe land, ocean, drought situation, agricultural questions, everything which can be observed from above, which provide information to better use the resources we have on the ground. So that's a cheaper way, more flexible way than to use satellites. So this is in the pipeline now.
Thank you all very much indeed, Mr. Secretary, for sparing time. You can nip over to Le Bourget and catch up there. To Bertrand and André, it's good to be sharing a platform with you again. Thank you, all three of you, very much indeed for sparing time this morning.
It's always a pleasure to be